Okay, starting recording, and now I'll hit broadcast. Good evening, and welcome to the Health, Safety, and Culture Abroad webinar hosted by Study Abroad UC San Diego. We welcome you to our presentation this evening, and we look forward to working with you to send your students abroad this summer and fall and next year. Your presenters tonight are myself, Kelly O'Sullivan Summer. I'm the director of the office here, and
my name is Jim Galvin, and I'm the director of global seminars as well as our OAP program.
Quickly, I'd like to go over the topics that we will be covering today. So we will share with you some tips on working together with our office, some general safety tips and personal safety tips for your students while they are abroad, tips for reducing risk while abroad, some health and well-being tips for your student, and then some information about culture shock and what your student can expect while abroad. Topics that we will not be able to cover in this webinar today will be country-specific information and detailed information about your individual student's program. And also, this is not intended as information for students, as your students will have several orientations of their own before they depart, both here in San Diego and then in the country once they arrive, and much more detailed information will be given to them. Some quick definitions as we're going through the webinar. EAP refers to the University of California Education Abroad program. GS refers to our summer faculty-led global seminars. And then OAP refers to all of our other programs. And we offer all of these through Study Abroad UC San Diego. If you don't know which program your student is participating on, just ask them. Okay, let's get started now. So this presentation is recorded. If at any time you would like to go back and refer to it, we will have it posted on our website tomorrow, and we'll give you the link at the end of this session. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation, and then we will try to get to as many questions as we can.
We want to work together with all of you to help your sons and daughters have a remarkable experience abroad. So here are a few broad themes that will be running throughout the presentation tonight. This is a time for parents and family to let go a little bit, to give your son or daughter the opportunity to develop some maturity, independence, self-confidence, but they're not on their own. You'll certainly stay in touch with them. There'll be plenty of support in country and with the Study Abroad office. So we want you to be supportive, but also to do your best to foster their independence. Now, as you probably already know, as the parents and family of college students, not everything is actually a crisis. So you may get a panicked email or Skype message, but again, within a day or two, many times these situations resolve themselves, or the student can simply ask for the full-time professional staff on site to give them assistance if the shower head is broken or if they're having some difficulty in a class. Now, if there is a real crisis, then there is a lot of support, not only on site in country, but also through the Study Abroad office here in San Diego. We are governed by a federal law, as all universities are. It's called the Federal Education Rights Privacy Act, or FERPA for short. So that does limit the amount of information, the type of information we are allowed to disclose to parents and family, unless your son or daughter signs a FERPA release. And then, of course, we're happy to disclose whatever they allow us to do. And we will post this presentation to our Study Abroad website, so you don't have to take notes on it. You'll be able to refer back to this. So I'd like to start with safety abroad. And this is the single most important thing that we as international education specialists focus on. We want your son or daughter to have a safe experience abroad. And there's a lot that we do to make sure it will be. This is a question that many of you have submitted in one form or another. So I'd like to go over how we work to keep your child safe abroad. The University of California, through EAP as well as the Global Seminars, and our outside affiliated study abroad programs through OAP, have security precautions. This includes consulting the U.S. State Department at travel.state.gov to check on the travel warning status. The State Department has changed their travel warning system this year, so now every country in the world is rated on a 1 through 4 scale. 4 being, active war zones or very dangerous places like Afghanistan or, North Korea. 3s being a little more stable than that, but still with significant caution. The 1s and 2s are most other places around the world, which means be sensible, be alert to your surroundings, but don't live in fear by any means. On all of these programs, there are full-time in-country professional support staff. So your sons and daughters are not on their own. They do not have to figure it out. And you do not feel like you have to suddenly become an expert on Japan or Germany or Argentina. Again, these are professionals who spend their careers working with study abroad students in universities. They're well-versed in U.S. health and safety procedures, res life procedures. So they will be a resource for your sons and daughters. And they will be learning more about the resources in pre-departure orientations, as well as on-site orientations, where they will actually meet the people who will be supporting them while they are abroad. They will get their phone numbers, they will have their contact information. So there's no need to worry that they're not going to have support. They do have it. The UC Study Abroad insurance for health issues and emergency evacuations exists. So several insurance questions came up along the way. And so, whatever health situation that might crop up for a student, or in the exceptionally rare situation that a student might need to be evacuated, that is covered by UC TRIPS insurance. Now, how can students reduce risks while abroad? Well, the first thing is to establish a relationship with the on-site program director as well as their fellow students. We always tell them to practice the buddy system. If they're going out to a restaurant or they're traveling to another town on the weekend, don't go alone. You wouldn't walk down a dark alley in San Diego at 3 a.m. You shouldn't do it in Berlin or Barcelona or Buenos Aires. Tell the program staff in country about their travel plans. So if Johnny or Susie is going to be going to the next country over, let somebody know about that so that if for some reason they get into trouble, we know where they are. They should keep their abroad address on them as well as full identification. They can keep a photocopy of their passport, but they don't need the actual passport on them at all times. Don't wear the wrong clothing. We're all proud of the country, we're proud of UCSD, etc., but sometimes clothing will mark you out as an American tourist, and what that really means is the pickpockets may come after you in some parts of the world. So, keeping the tone of voice low, not looking and sounding like a tourist, keeping a bit of a lower profile can go a long way towards avoiding the simple risks like a pickpocket. Know where the U.S. consulate is in the country and register. The travel.state.gov has a registration section for the Safe Traveler program. That's always wise for students to do that. It takes less than 5 minutes. Scan and email copies of passport and important documents like a photocopy of the front and back of your credit card to yourself. So in the unlikely event that you are the victim of a pickpocket or a theft, you can quickly reconstitute those documents. Again, I mentioned before, stick with a group, don't go it alone, and be smart about high-risk activities. And again, as with all of these areas, we really value your partnership in telling your sons and daughters, to just do sensible things. Avoid extreme sports, don't bungee jump, pet wild animals, or join in political demonstrations. You just don't know where the risks are, and they don't necessarily have the same level of government regulation and health and safety regulation in all of these particular areas. Personal safety. Every country is a little bit different in terms of attitudes, taboos, cultural practices, things like dating and whatnot. So again, in the orientations, especially the in-country orientation, these details can be covered. It's important to respect other cultures, especially dress codes. California beachwear is not appropriate if you are going through a cathedral in Europe, or if you are going to a cultural event in Tokyo. So it's always safe to dress a little more formally. We've talked about the buddy system. In some countries around the world, strangers will become overly friendly with Americans. So, while it's always nice to get to know locals, you do want to be cautious and certainly don't accept any unreasonable offers or undue interest, at least when you're initially getting to know someone. Notify the study center about weekend travel, and always keep that study abroad health insurance card on them at all times. And this is not the same health insurance that you would use during the regular year. It's a separate insurance, and all the students have been told about this. And other considerations. Set up a communication plan with your child. We all know from the headlines that occasionally there will be a natural disaster or, unfortunately, a terrorist attack. So if that happens, know exactly what you all will do. Maybe you will go to a Facebook site or communicate via email or get onto Skype. You'll have a plan that you discuss before your son or daughter goes abroad, and we hope you never have to use it. But if something happens, you'll know what to do, and you just need to be calm about that. Be careful about overusing the cell phones, because overseas calling plans can be very expensive. You can pay a lot of money per minute. So check with your cell phone company before going abroad to see if there's a low rate. But more often than not, people will use Skype rather than cell phones while abroad. Insurance and theft protection. Check your personal property insurance to see if it covers lost or stolen items like computers, iPods, cameras, and know what your deductible is. So if your son loses a $1,000 telephoto lens camera and your deductible is $500, then you'll get $500 back from the insurance company, and take the loss of the first $500. So know what that is. I recommend keeping valuables safe by using money belts, making sure purses are zipped and kept forward, turn backpacks inward, especially in terminals or crowds. And this is very important. Don't bring irreplaceable keepsakes, grandma's earrings, or a really, really expensive camera, or things like that. It just isn't worth it. So moving on to the next area, health and well-being. It's very important to plan ahead, and I always recommend that students have their emergency card with them, If they take any type of prescription medication or have a medical condition, they should keep that information listed on them. We have a sample of an emergency card here, but you can type something up and to your own needs. I want to talk a little bit about health and evacuation insurance. The UC Education Abroad program and the UC San Diego Global Seminar students have health insurance while abroad, and we have talked to the students about what they need to do in terms of signing up for this insurance and keeping their health card with them. Students on the Opportunities Abroad program, these are programs outside of the UC system, but which we accept credit for as transfer credit. Almost all of these programs include insurance of some type, but they should check with that study abroad organization. All Global Seminar and OAP students must sign up for free University of California TRIPS insurance at the following website. Now, EAP has their own international insurance link, and that has been provided to your son or daughter. And EAP has a program guided website with more information on that on their website. Now, upon arrival, students will attend the health and safety orientation. That's usually within the first 24 to 48 hours. And that includes an introduction of the full-time professional staff that will be there to assist your son or daughter. It typically includes an overview of health, safety, cultural practices, the do's and don'ts, and a walking tour of the neighborhood to familiarize your son or daughter with their surroundings. At that orientation in country, your son or daughter will receive the contact information for the program director or responsible individual in the country, and they should keep that information in their purse or wallet, put it into their smartphone, or however they're going to access that information. That on-site person, regardless of what their title is there to assist if your son or daughter is ill or needs to get to see a doctor, or if the shower head isn't working in their apartment, or whatever it may be. They can help with that. Your son or daughter does not have to try and find the yellow pages or look up a plumber or a dentist abroad. This professional team will help them with anything. Another tip, be aware that the body can sometimes take a little while to adjust to a new environment. So students might pick up a bug on the airplane, or they might get a foodborne illness. It's not terrorism and kidnapping, it's travelers' diarrhea and pickpocketing that are the major issues to be aware of. So, avoid street food, eat in restaurants, especially in countries that are prone to foodborne illness. Make sure the food is cooked, avoid fruit juices from stands on the street corner, common sense things like that. And eat a balanced diet and get enough sleep. They'll be going, but, they need to pace themselves. It's important for young people to learn to follow the local news. If there's an earthquake or there's a general strike or something like that, they should be watching the news or reading the newspaper online each day, even if it's just to scan the headlines, to stay in touch. Bring a copy of any prescription medication and a supply of the medication in the original container if your son or daughter takes any meds. And that part about the supply in the original container is important. We once had a student who took several pills for a medical condition and poured all the different bottles of pills into one Ziploc bag because it would fit in his luggage better. Well, you can only imagine what Homeland Security thought of a young person bringing a bag of unlabeled pills in. So use common sense with all these things, folks. Now, speaking of common sense, I want to talk a little bit about alcohol and drugs. Really, when students get into trouble, it's because of alcohol and drugs. So students should be aware of different cultural practices concerning this abroad. For example, there isn't another country in the world that has the US style binge drinking. So it's not cool to binge drink abroad. It may be acceptable to have a glass of wine or a beer with dinner with friends, but the surest way to be characterized as the stereotypical drunken, ugly American is to engage in binge drinking. But far worse than that is the risk that goes with being inebriated and losing control, where there have been instances of assault abroad or sexual assault. It's because people have been under the influence. So it's really important to realize this isn't, a Disney vacation. This is another country, and you need to be aware of your surroundings, go with other people, and don't put yourself at risk. And that's a lesson that you've probably already told your sons and daughters when they went off to college, and you can reinforce that for us by just telling them to exercise common sense. They will probably be of drinking age while they are abroad. Most countries have an 18-year-old drinking age. So that's something to be aware of. Can they be arrested abroad? Yes. About 1/3 of U.S. citizens who are arrested abroad are arrested on drug charges. And I want to spend just a little while to talk about this. While marijuana is now legal in California and several other U.S. states, and it is legal in a few places around the world, Amsterdam, for example, in most countries it's still illegal. And so you can actually do real prison time for drugs that would maybe not receive anywhere near that sentence or would be legal here. So it's very important that they not engage in drug use overseas. That's absolutely critical. Some other legal issues. Every country has different legal codes, laws, and policies. And if a student violates those laws, they can be sent home without a refund. That's very important to know. Another key piece to know is that the U.S. Constitution does not apply abroad, and it does not protect your son or daughter in another country. Each country has its own constitution or legal system, and it may be very different from our own. So they should not engage in any kind of behavior that's at all questionable. But if, in the rare instance that a student is arrested, the U.S. Embassy cannot get your son or daughter out of jail, but the student should contact their center director, and then we could get a embassy official, hopefully, to visit them and discuss the next steps. So again, we don't want to have this happen, so just reiterate to your sons and daughters that they should be on their best behavior while abroad. The University of California Code of Conduct applies while students are abroad. Students are representatives of UCSD and the United States, so we want them to be good ambassadors. Violations of our conduct code can and have resulted in suspension not only from the program, but also in serious instances from the university. A student can be sent home without refunds, and they can receive Fs in their coursework. So we try to emphasize, and we hope that you will emphasize as well, that this is not a vacation. This is a study abroad experience, and we really want the students to be good ambassadors. And we are pleased to say that 99.99% of students are good ambassadors. But when something goes wrong, it can really go wrong. So your help in emphasizing these points is much appreciated. Now, I'd like to turn to success and adjusting abroad. A culture is a little bit like an iceberg. You can see some aspects of a culture, but there's a lot that's under the waterline. So you might be walking down the street in Tokyo and you can see restaurants and the bright lights and music and whatnot, but there's huge elements of culture and society that are sort of under the surface. Americans are rugged individualists. In Japan and many other countries, there's more of a collective society. So people don't tend to stand out quite like Americans do, being loud and brash and whatnot. So learning about the other culture and how not to upset the apple cart is important. Students can read about this before they go abroad, but they'll also learn more about it in those orientations. And they should use this as a great experience to learn and respect another culture. So here are some of the elements that are under the waterline. Personal space. Some societies stand farther apart than others. Some make eye contact, some don't. In many societies, there's a lot of nonverbal communication that can inadvertently send messages. The nature of friendship. In America, you get to know someone in 5 minutes and they're your new best friend. In many other cultures, it can take a considerable amount of time to really develop a deep friendship. So your son or daughter isn't doing anything wrong if they don't have 20 new friends within the first week. It just may mean that they need to be persistent and friendly and open and flexible, and that will come in time. So dating can be another issue. So we always encourage people to be cautious because signs or signals in the US may not be picked up the same way overseas. And again, this is something that your son or daughter can learn more about, especially in the on-site orientation. They can ask these questions. Now, many students will go through some stages of adjustment, and it's not unlike what happened during the fall of their freshman year of college. There might be initial anxiety and then excitement and elation about being there, then some culture shock. Things are different from what they've expected or known. Then you begin to adjust, but maybe it's not going quite as well. You learn more about the culture the longer you're there, so you gain more confidence. But by that point, you're getting ready to return, and you might have some anxiety and stress when you come back. So it can be an up and down roller coaster. The point to emphasize here is that this is normal. Just about every student experiences this. Some have sharper peaks and valleys than others. And again, not all of these are a crisis. You can help your son or daughter by listening and being supportive. If they really are having a tough time, again, they are not on their own. That's when your son or daughter should speak to the center director. In rare occasions, if they need to speak to a counselor, that is certainly available overseas. Now, I'd like to shift a little bit and talk about money. I encourage all families to sit down with their sons and daughters and make a study abroad budget in advance and really stick to that. One of the biggest budget busters can be cell phone use. It can get really expensive. So try using services like Skype or Zoom, like we're using tonight, to stay in touch. The calling plan, definitely check with your cell phone provider. If there's an international calling plan, some students will buy a plan abroad and will just use the phone for emergencies or maybe a quick text, but not long, detailed conversations internationally. That can ring up huge phone bills. If your son or daughter will be using a credit card or an ATM card, call the bank or credit card company or credit union before departure. Let them know that you'll be in France from this date to that date, so that when your son or daughter puts the card into an ATM abroad, that it won't eat the card, but that they'll get out the money that they need. Learn the local currency conversion and keep that in mind. It can change. I do also recommend getting the equivalent of about $100 in local currency in small denomination bills before you go abroad. Keep that in your wallet or purse so that if you arrive and the plane is late and the airport pickup, if there is one, has left for the night and you have to get a taxi and buy a sandwich, and they don't take credit cards at the sandwich shop and the airport, you can pay everything with cash and just get there. That's Jim's rules of travel, otherwise known as Murphy's Law. Also, students should learn local customs regarding tipping and taxes. Actually, in many countries, the tip is built into the price in a restaurant, so you don't want to tip them twice, but that's something to check. The academic culture, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about teaching and grading abroad. You know, we're somewhat used to how professors grade here in America, but often abroad it may be quite different. Maybe instead of having tests and quizzes every few weeks throughout the term, there might be one large paper or presentation at the end of class. And so students will be expected to manage their time and stay on the readings. There isn't quite as much hand-holding abroad in some situations. So they need to be ready for that. And they can learn more about that in their on-site orientation and by speaking with their professors while abroad. But one thing that you shouldn't do, family members should not contact professors abroad. That's just not accepted overseas, as it sometimes may be here. All right, turning to diet, you know, food is obviously one of the wonderful parts of studying abroad, sampling new cuisines, new foods that you've never tried before. But some students have certain dietary restrictions. They may be vegetarian or vegan. And depending on the country where you're going, there may be many options, there may be very limited options, it may be non-existent. So ask in advance if this is a priority, if this is important. Encourage your students to try the local culture. They may find some new favorite dishes. Now, most of our students are either staying in apartments or in, sometimes for global seminars and residencias or hotels as well as apartments, but occasionally we have students staying in homestays. So if they are staying in a homestay, most of these go well. Mine 30 years ago was an absolute delight. But in rare circumstances, a student may not click with their host family. And if that's the case, they should contact their center director or the appropriate person on site who's full-time staff there to assist them. And if necessary, they can be moved. Now, moving to sustainability. Understanding that our use of resources is far greater than most other societies is an important starting point. Many countries around the world may have limits on internet access. In some places, electricity and water are in short supply. So it's important to be respectful and not feel entitled to things. So learn about local circumstances. Taking public transportation, for example. Finding out about recycling and trash policies, as well as conservation on energy and water are particularly important. Internet use is probably one of the bigger culture shocks because we're so used to having instant internet access, 9999 percent reliability, huge unlimited bandwidth, and most other places around the world, even in places like Western Europe, the internet is not as fast, reliable, or widespread. And other societies may just not have the 24/7 internet access. So it's important to encourage your son or daughter not to spend all their time abroad on the internet. They're there to meet people, to learn about the culture, to interact. And so unplugging a little bit from the internet's important. It doesn't mean that they can't post something quickly on Facebook and maybe you follow along to see what they did that day, but they shouldn't spend hours and hours on the internet. That would be a loss of the opportunity to learn more about this new culture that they're in. Now, as much as we hope their experience is going to be a wonderful one, we do have to realize that not everything is perfect abroad, and every society has its problems, and there is prejudice abroad in some places. So students may experience prejudice for a variety of reasons, including race, gender, religion, LGBTQ identity. Students can seek support and advice from the center director, the full-time staff, the faculty there, if they're experiencing any difficulty in these areas. If they feel threatened, they should, of course, contact the local authorities. But one thing that I want to emphasize is that don't condemn the entire country by the actions of one prejudiced person. You know, we wouldn't want our society to be judged by the actions of a few, and so we should apply the same standard abroad. Now, after the student comes back, there are some adjustment issues, and I just want to cover them for a little bit. It's important for you as parents and family to be prepared for the fact that your son or daughter may have some adjustment issues when they come home. When I came home from studying abroad 30 years ago, family and friends were happy to listen to my stories for the first 10, 15 minutes, and then life was going to go back to normal. But I still wanted to talk about my experience. I was still processing it. And so I would encourage you to be patient and listen to their stories, reflect on their experiences, help them think through the meaning of this. For many of our students, it's one of the most life-changing experiences they've experienced. And they may want to continue their involvement with all things international. And so here are a few ideas. There is a residence hall on campus called the International House. It is half U.S. students, half internationals. They may wish to live there. But even if they don't, the iHouse offers many international cultural activities and mixers for students. So that's a great way to remain engaged internationally while being right here on campus. Now, our Study Abroad office also hosts a variety of returnee events and coffees so that students can connect with new friends and share their international experience. There are many student groups on campus and in the community that have an international theme or do community service work. So there are many ways that they can stay engaged. Students should also plan to internationalize their resume with this newfound experience. And our Career Services Center can help them do that. In fact, updating the resume, learning how to write a good cover letter, and to develop the elevator speech, that 30-second personal announcement about their skills and abilities, those are all available at our Career Center. And we encourage your sons and daughters to use that service. It will help them in the job market. Now, students can apply to be a study abroad assistant here in our office. They can also plan to study abroad again. So there are many ways that a student can consider additional international experiences. They may look at a career with an international focus. So we are here to help them, and the university is here to help them upon their return. And we, again, just encourage you to stay engaged with them, not just for the first few days, but these discussions may continue for a few years on and off. And they will really appreciate your insights and support in this whole process, and we do as well. Now, a few other announcements. We are going to be holding a workshop called World Travel 101 that will give some basic trip tips on packing and traveling. It's going to be held on May 23rd at 6 p.m. here in the Study Abroad office. There'll be more information about it on our website, studyabroad.ucsd.edu. And that website, by the way, holds a wealth of knowledge and information about our programs, including links to EAP and global seminars, etc. And we're going to be following this general webinar with a couple of specifically tailored webinars. The first will be for those with the son or daughter going on the University of California Education Abroad Program, or EAP. That one will be on Thursday, May 10 from 5 to 6. And for those with sons or daughters going on a global seminar, that webinar will be on Wednesday, May 23rd from 5 to 6. And so we encourage you to join us as relates to the appropriate program for your son or daughter. For OAP, because those choices are so vast, what we always encourage families to do is to look at the pre-departure materials that the Study Abroad organization will have sent your son or daughter, and that will be an excellent preparation. Many of them have handbooks. So I would just close this portion of the presentation with a quote, which you may wish to share with your sons and daughters. 20 years from now, they'll be more disappointed by what they didn't do than what they did do. So embrace this opportunity to really explore the world and explore themselves, and they will have a remarkable experience indeed. So again, let me emphasize the web resources for this session. This webinar will be located on our Study Abroad website under the Family tab. So really, you just need to remember studyabroad.ucsd.edu as a resource. Now, we're going to open it up to your questions, and Kelly is going to be moderating this. And again, let me say that we won't be able to answer specific questions about housing in Italy or the food in Chile, but your sons and daughters will have information from their orientations prior to departure and on-site orientations that will help answer those questions. Kelly, would you like to begin with questions?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jim. As Jim said, we will now open it up to your questions. If you have any, we have a few minutes to answer some questions for you. And if you don't have any, that's fine too. We did receive one question earlier at the start of the presentation about closed captioning for this presentation, and I do apologize that we do not have that ability this year, but we will look into it for next year because we know that's important. I don't see any questions coming in, Jim.
All right. Well, we realize that sometimes questions may crop up down the line. What I would recommend is that have an ongoing conversation with your son or daughter. Share your questions with them because they will be getting the information. It's always sent to the student. So if it's a question about the housing or what to pack for Sri Lanka or whatever it may be, many times your son or daughter already will have that information. For example, I can tell you that the Global Seminar students this month and next will all have their orientations. So before they go abroad, they will have a goodly amount of information, and EAP and OAP as well. So that can often be the best way to get questions answered for the nuts and bolts. But one generic piece of advice, a few people had asked about what to pack. Generally, the students are going to buy some things while they're abroad. So leave some room in the suitcases for things they'll acquire there. It's a rare student that's going somewhere that doesn't have malls and shopping centers or local markets or whatnot where they can pick up T-shirts and, other items.
Jim, we do have some questions coming in.
Great.
Here's a couple easy ones. Will the student have access to an ATM? And I will say yes, in most countries, especially when a student lands, they will have access to a secure and safe ATM in the airport. When I travel, I always try to get a little bit of money out at the airport so that I at least have money for a taxi or for the bus or for the metro system. And usually inside the airport, students are pretty safe. And then it just depends on the rest of where the student will be traveling and where their city is. You know, some smaller cities might not have very many ATMs available. Larger cities will, all over the world, will almost always have ATMs available. And then there's a question about schedules for weekend trips and whether or not those are available.
Do they mean weekend trips on their own? I would assume that if a student wants to do some independent weekend travel, again, first go with a friend, don't go alone. But many of the sites where your sons and daughters are going, the local on-site professional staff are a very good resource. They can give you ideas about music festivals in the city where they're based, or what's the best train to take to Tokyo this weekend, or whatever it may be. So they can often get some good assistance there. But again, we always emphasize with students that this is a study abroad, so they are expected to be back in class first thing Monday morning. And if they're not, they're going to lose points for it. So it's always important not to cut it too close, to get back at a reasonable hour on Sunday so that they can get to class the next day.
There are a couple questions about the actual plane travel and buying tickets. One question is about whether or not, what the recommended timing would be to buy tickets. I don't know what you would say, Jim, but I kind of always think that it's better to buy a ticket as much in advance as possible, at least 1 month and 2 or 3 months if possible, because I think you have the flexibility to just get better airfare if you have a little bit of time to search for different airfares. And then the other question about that is about buying a round trip ticket. I know more airlines are going towards the pricing model where they just price out every flight segment as an individual one-way ticket. So I would say, depending upon the length of the program that your student is going on, if it's a short program like a 5-week summer global seminar and your student for sure knows that they're going to return on a very specific day at the end of the program, or maybe a day or two after the program ends, I would say that would be best to buy a round trip ticket. But if your student's going for an entire semester, it might be good to wait on the return ticket, because sometimes final schedules abroad can change. The student might make some friends and might want to travel at the end of that semester a little bit before returning home.
That's right. The only thing I would add there, Kelly, is that some students will decide they may want to backpack for a few weeks after the end of the program with some new friends. And if they're prone to that level of spontaneity or flexibility, looking at a ticket with open return date may also be a good option, because maybe they want to fly home from a different city,
right,
than the one where they studied. So that's another option. And the UC system contracts with STA Travel, and STA can sell tickets with open return dates. They also have, for students going to Europe, the Eurail passes, which are a wonderful way to get around Europe, especially if you have baggage. You don't want to fly around Europe on those discount airlines with anything more than a toothbrush and a small overnight kit, or else they'll charge you hundreds of euros in bag fees. That's how they make their big money off unsuspecting American tourists. So taking the train is a better option often for Europe.
And then there are a couple questions about traveling at the beginning of a trip rather than at the end of a trip, and also meeting up with peers before traveling. So our office does our best to try to connect students with each other who are going to the same location before they go abroad. So with our summer global seminars, all of those students in those cohorts will absolutely meet with each other and with the professor at least once, if not multiple times, before they go abroad. For students going on EAP programs and OAP programs, we do have a general pre-departure, we call it a pre-departure celebration, where we invite students to come, we give them some information, and then we connect them with other students going to the same location or at least the same country. So we do encourage them to connect with each other before they depart. And I would say traveling ahead of time, I think that is pretty common. Students go, usually maybe 1 to 2 days, if not a week ahead of time, to kind of travel and get a sense, get over some jet lag and get a sense of where they are. It depends on the location. I see this one question is specifically about Norway, and I think Norway is a very safe place and easy place to travel. So I wouldn't worry about a student going to Norway for a week before the program starts. Jim, do you have any other suggestions on that?
If they do arrive early for travel, especially if they're on a global seminar, it's important to realize that with global seminars, most of them have an airport pickup. They won't get an airport pickup if they arrive early on their own. It's only, one window of time on arrival date, and they know what that day is for the particular program. But we certainly think that can be a great way, as Kelly said, to get acclimated, but there's no requirement that you arrive early.
That's a really good point about the global seminars. And then let's see, there's a recommendation from a parent or a family member suggesting that STA Travel was able to find much cheaper rates. So we recommend that you work with STA Travel if you can. And then there are quite a few site and program specific questions. We will cover those if you can attend either the EAP webinar later on. It's on May 10th, or the Global Seminar webinar on May 23rd, Jim?
Yes, May 23rd for that.
Yeah, and we'll be able to go over more site-specific program information, but also, more importantly, we will give you the resources where you can look up the site-specific program information. If you want ahead of time, and if you want to look at the EAP resources, you can go to the EAP website. It's, we have the link to the website on our website.
That's right. Just go to studyabroad.ucsd.edu and then look under programs, and it will have the EAP link, and it'll have global seminar links, so you'll be able to learn a lot more.
Yeah, here it is. The EAP website is eap.ucop.edu. And if you look on that website, if your student's going on an EAP program, there is a Parents and Family tab, and there's a lot of detailed information, including online program guides for every single EAP country and program. So you'll be able to find a lot of that information in there. And that includes questions about, like, if students land and flights are delayed and they miss rides, who they should contact once they get in the country, bus pickup, all of that kind of information. Also, host families, I think on all of our programs, if there is a homestay that a student elects to do, the program will absolutely organize that. The student does not find the family on their own, and we know that our host families all over the world are vetted and checked out in depth before they are allowed to host students as well. Let me see. Yes, you can absolutely contact either of us or any of the other advisors in our office ahead of time before your student travels. We welcome your questions, and you can find all of our contact information as well as the countries that we advise for on our website. Let's see. There are a couple questions about health insurance, and the EAP webinar, again, that's on May 10th, and your students, if they're on an EAP program, will receive an invitation to that webinar, just like they received this invitation and then forwarded it to you. And then the Global Seminar webinar on May 23rd. Those two presentations will talk a little bit more in detail about health insurance and negotiating that. And let's see, there's a question about the actual dates of the program. Again, that information for EAP will be in the specific country and program guides on the website, on the EAP website. If you can't find them, just email one of us and we can direct you to that. But you'll also, on the webinar on May 10th, we will go through all of the EAP website and show you where to find that information as well. A couple questions about visas, and that's the same thing. Your students will receive that information both from EAP and from Global Seminars. In fact, our Global Seminars team really works closely with the students to make sure that they get what they need in terms of their passport, and if they need a visa, we always ask students, if they're international students, we make sure that they know which type of visa that they need if they're not US citizens, or if they are US citizens and need a visa, we help them with that. There's a question about the FERPA form. Is that on our website, Jim?
It's not on the website, but what we would ask is that the student should contact their study abroad advisor, and then the student fills out the FERPA form, not the parent. They are the ones who legally control their information. And so they will designate who we are allowed to release it to, whether it's mom or dad or both. The names have to be written out, contact information provided. And then your son or daughter would also indicate what type of information we are allowed to release. Now, if it's everything related to the study abroad program, that could be, a blanket statement, or if it's just, a question about housing or something of this sort. But more often than not, folks, the easiest way to get good information is just talk to your son or daughter, because they will be getting a lot of this information through handbooks or packets or online materials or whatnot, and then they can share that with you directly.
There's another suggestion about phone use abroad. This sounds like an experienced traveler. Have your student turn their phone to airplane mode and leave it in airplane mode the entire time abroad, and turn on Wi-Fi while in airplane mode, and then they'll be able to communicate via Wi-Fi apps such as Skype or WhatsApp. Let's see. And then there are a couple of questions about billing and about paying tuition, specifically for EAP. We will cover all of that in the May 10th webinar. Okay, it looks like, I think we've covered the majority of the questions. And we are just about out of time. So I will just say thank you to all of you who participated. We really value your cooperation and our partnership with sending your students abroad, as we know that you are a very critical part of your students' success while they are abroad. So thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, again, please look at our contact information on our website, and you can certainly send us direct questions, or you can send an email to abroad@ucsd.edu, and that will get directed to one of us to help answer your question. I think that's all for now. We will send out a short survey tomorrow by email to those of you who participated, and we would welcome your feedback for future improvement of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Bye.